Hello to Ben Shapiro and all his fans. I am making this video to tell you you are all wrong, especially Mr. Shapiro. Completely and utterly wrong. And it's about how a National Health Service works, and I'm going to show you why. I have heard him say, well, something like the following. I did try and find the quote, but I couldn't, so I'm paraphrasing it. But I'm sure one of you guys watching this will find it. He said that with a National Health Service or a nationalised health service, the government can force doctors to work under threat of shooting them if they do not. Oh, Ben, how wrong can a man be? Let me tell you, Mr. Shapiro, whose wife is a doctor. Did you know that? Well, now you do. What happens when you have a National Health Service is not that the government shoots the doctors, but that the doctors not only have the government over a barrel, but they have that government over a barrel and, I am sorry to say, with its trousers down. And before I embarrass everyone anymore, I'll tell you that I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Mind. I'm also on Twitter and Gab. I used to be on Parler as well, but they seem to have closed down, which is a bit of a shame. Okay, where was I? Yes, I let you know on Twitter and Gab when I've uploaded a new video because YouTube's a bit careless about that sometimes. And speaking of YouTube, if you're subscribed on YouTube, just check you are actually still subscribed. That's not a given. The best way you can help my channel is by liking this video, by sharing it, and by subscribing wherever you are. All the links are in the description. You can also donate, which I appreciate, but liking and subscribing both do my videos and my channel a lot of good, and I'd appreciate your help there. Okay, let's just get on with talking about the doctors. First, they have opted to strike, and then the nurses again. So we have two sets of the health service. I'll put it up there. It does say the death rate's going up. Now the doctors aren't working. Well, that's hardly a surprise. Do you see a pattern with the way the doctors and the nurses seem to be sort of hand in hand about striking? I'm going to refresh your memories and for some of you actually teach you about the dreadful 1970s here in Britain. In the 1970s, when this country relied on coal mostly for energy production, the coal mines were the focus of the strikes, even though through the 1970s, we had Labour governments. So it's not like, it was the toffs against the working classes. The unions had no scruples about holding their Labour government, the Labour government that they had put into power. They had no scruples about holding them to ransom. And the government kept coming up with all sorts of agreements with different names, and nobody really believed what was going on, and they'd come up with one agreement in the afternoon, and then the unions broke that same agreement the following morning because they knew they could do absolutely anything they wanted simply by threatening to turn the lights out. And of course, encouraged by this, other unions did similar. Rubbish collectors went on strike and all sorts of detritus piled up in the streets. I'll put a photo up here. But that was possibly not as bad as the corpses that were piled up in the hastily commissioned warehouses because the mortuaries were full because the grave diggers also went on strike. It did come to light sometime later that much of the union structure was actually being controlled by the Soviet Union at that time. Oleg Gordievsky, a KGB colonel who defected to the UK in 1985. It's a fascinating story. There's a book about it. I'll put a picture of the book jacket up there. I read it too. It's a fascinating book and really exciting, proper spy stuff. Anyway, Gordievsky revealed that the General Secretary of the gigantic Transport and General Workers Union, who was called Jack Jones, was actively working. He was employed by the Soviet government for most of his union career, and his wife actually had been a Comintern agent, an official agent, since the 1930s. Obviously, this was the way the Soviet Union had decided to beat Britain, and I'm quite sure, although I have to say I don't have a shred of proof, that the sudden industrial discontent that we're experiencing here at present has at least partially, if not entirely, been whipped up by some sort of Russian agency. After all, Putin's government might not be the Soviet Union anymore, but the KGB, whether it's called the KGB or the FSB or the Barnstable Town Youth Marching Band, it doesn't really matter what they call themselves. It has all the mechanisms in place that it's had for the past 100 years. And obviously, it would not hesitate to use them. It just seems too coincidental that all the health services at once have decided that they're being underpaid and overworked. You know, I have no doubt that they are underpaid and overworked. Who isn't? I made a video recently in which I talked about the politicisation of the National Health Service and the way it's showing its degeneration in its adoption of all sorts of gender nonsense. Well, this sort of politicisation, the striking and the complaints, it's just another symptom of that degeneration. And well, the problem is this. Mrs. Thatcher, when she came to power, decided to go head-to-head with the unions, and particularly with the miners. But being a good housewife, she planned ahead in order to stop them from blackmailing the government, as they'd been in the habit of doing up to then. She rather quietly managed to buy in supplies of coal. I think it was principally from Poland, and she stockpiled it, so that the next time the miners downed tools, they did so in the full glare of the still lit electricity supply. And it looks like we have a similar situation now. Britain is sort of at war with Russia. And I put it to you that Russia has therefore decided that it's going to be sort of at war with us and is using all the weapons in its arsenal. The trouble is, you can't stockpile doctors as you can stockpile coal. And the government is going to end up in the same sort of pickle that the weak Labour governments were in with regard to their union masters in the 1970s, unless this government resorts to the sort of radical measures followed by Margaret Thatcher all those years ago. So, Mr. Shapiro, if a National Health Service is what it says in the name, that is, national, it can therefore be controlled nationally by people of good or ill will. And if the doctors decide nationally to kill British people, because that's what they're doing, then shooting them still isn't an option. Well, not round here anyway. If the government had a brain, then it would find a way of terminating the health service without terminating the doctors. Because otherwise we're not going to be governed by the government we have elected, but by whoever's in charge of the British Medical Association forever and ever, because we're so frightened for our lives and would be so grateful for whatever medical attention they'd be pleased to offer us. It's not a very good situation. All right, Till next time.
Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.